Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru. Welcome to Yogananda podcast, where we're going line by line through the autobiography of a yogi. We're on chapter 21, a new chapter. So we're going to kick that off today. We'll go through some of our expectations. We'll read a couple of the main stories at the beginning of the chapter, and then we'll look to wrap up and talk about what's to look forward to in the next episode. And we've got a full gang today. So Lauren, Priyanka, Mike, myself. So those people watching on the video can see them pumping their hands and cheering on. So yeah, good to have everybody on board and ready to rock. This chapter is another short chapter. So we visit Kashmir is the title, following on the previous chapter where essentially he didn't. He wasn't going to visit Kashmir. This time, really, the dream is coming true after multiple attempts of trying to visit Kashmir. It's an interesting chapter in that it is short. It is followed up by a previously short chapter, essentially about the same subject matter. So it is quite continuous, as it were, as opposed to some of the chapters that sort of begin a whole new topic and delving into a whole new area of Yogananda's life. This is quite continuous. And so reading into this chapter, I saw just how gargantuan that journey was that they all undertook as a group. And it just made me realize just how far we have come as a people, where we can fly on planes so readily and get around so easily. We're going to see all the different methods that he takes, Yogananda and Sri Yukteswar and the crew take to get from A to B to C to D, and one's involving sort of a rickshaw, and a horse and carriage. So I feel very privileged now living in this 21st century. But this chapter, we're really going to see another instance of the guru coming in to show his prowess. And I wondered what your take on this was in terms of the theme for the chapter. Of course, we have this epic journey that they undertake, and we see the beauty of the area unfolding, Kashmir and everything unfolding. But also the intuition, I would say, that Sri Yukteswar displays, I just find really amazing that it's done in such a low-key way, and he just casually drops it into conversation. So yeah, I'm looking forward to breaking down this chapter. Any takes from you guys?
I think the theme's quite difficult to pull a thread through the various facets, but if I had to, I'd say it's about the various ways in which Mukunda spends time with his guru, from mundane kind of traveling touristy type things, but then there's still depth in there to like really profound things at the end of the chapter where he's talking about healing and absorbing karma, etc. So it's a really lot of contrast in this, right? We start with travel, and then Mukunda, Paramahansa Yogananda reflects on all the amazing places on the planet, and he literally gives it an award, kind of what's the best, what's first spot, what's second, what's joint second, all that kind of stuff. So it's you're talking about the magnificence of God's kind of creation, and then he literally just flies into Sri Yukteswar's illness and how he was able to absorb the karma of his disciples that were with him. And then he talks about essentially yogis and masters doing that for their disciples, and then that they don't need to do that actually. So it covers, and the end is really, so we start with something pretty light, traveling, and the end becomes like some of those profound bits of the autobiography in terms of how we're going to have to tackle them. But I also really like the great banter in this in this section. Probably not in this episode, but between Mukunda and his friends and on this trip, and also Sri Yukteswar as well, giving Mukunda soft little jibes here and there about predictions and his expectations and that kind of stuff, which we'll talk about today. But I really found it sweet as well that Mukunda couldn't fathom the flaws, in his disciples, and that he, not disciples, in his brother disciples. And then he was shocked by them, and also later on, how he really can't stand to lose Sri Yukteswar as well. So really, really human
Mm.
sides of Guruji coming out in this chapter. And also an interesting point to note: this chapter will answer the question, one of the questions that you may have on why there are multiple prints for the same edition of the book, which we'll get to, I think, maybe in the third or fourth episode in this book.
Mm. Yeah, it's a rather understated chapter in my memory, but it's there's so many layers to this. So yeah, really, really looking forward to unpacking it with you guys. So we have the throwback to the previous chapter where it begins by Sri Yukteswar saying, you're strong enough to travel to Yogananda and that he will accompany Yogananda to Kashmir. And this was 2 days after the miraculous recovery from Asiatic cholera. So timing is everything here. There was a miraculous healing, we can say, where Sri Yukteswar foresaw what was going to happen and then, pulled all the strings like the puppet master that he was doing with Yogananda's around Yogananda to thwart his plans. And, after a couple of days, he deemed him fit enough to travel. So no need for a doctor immediately when you've got Sri Yukteswar by your side. And there was the 6 of the groups of Yogananda, Sri Yukteswar, and 4 others. They began the trip that evening, traveling north. And so this is from Calcutta. So the first stop was Simla, or if you look it up on Google, Shimla. Don't know how you pronounce it, if there's a difference, Preg. I'm going to you for that one, Preg, Shimla, or in the book it's Simla.
I'd say it's SH, and normally how it's pronounced.
Got it. So this is a queenly city resting on the throne of Himalayan hills. So it's already given a very royal description here from Yogananda. And it is actually of high significance in India, and historically we'll see we'll touch on that very briefly. And the description here is that they're strolling over these steep streets, so you can picture it really sort of embedded in the hills near the Himalayan mountains, which, if you look up Shimla, you'll see that it's known as the summer capital of India. So the Brits, going back to the 20th century, made their home there, let's say, and they enjoyed the climate in the summer. And I say that because there's English strawberries for sale. and this kind of made me think, well, why are there English strawberries? I get that, they have a history, let's say, the English in India, but this is quite specific. But it was a city where the English had great interest. And there's a woman here saying that, there's English strawberries for sale. And this was something that drew the attention of the group. I would say, by the way, Shimla's a place where today it's actually, when I Googled it to research it, it's in question today because there was a 1972 agreement between Pakistan and India that is now under, let's say, repute. So I really hope everything is maintained there peacefully. But even to this day, it's a very well known and touristy spot, and it's full of beauty. And as Yogananda says here, the group was admiring the magnificent views there. So it was a place to go then. It's a place to go now, 100 years on.
Yeah. This woman squatting in the picturesque open marketplace is a scene that you'll see quite often in India. And this squat that she's doing, it'll look really like she's really comfortable. But you try it for more than 15 seconds and you will be finished every part of your body. So it's like it literally is an asana. So it is quite an advanced yogic posture. Like it takes many years to be able to be comfortable in that. And especially like if you try it right now, just completely, squat with no weights, like people, squat with weights these days. But if you just squat with no weights and just sit there for a long time, you'll find that it's tough. And then try doing it. The proper way is doing it is to have both feet parallel. If they're slightly
Hmm.
angled, it's really easy. Like you can, well, it's not easy
Mm.
actually. It's still difficult, but you'll think it's easier. But then if you try with both feet facing parallel forward, then it's like a complete. It's just that little shift makes a big difference. But yeah, so many people in India, just if there's no seat, down they go. It's
Mm.
and then it must be so calm. I've tried it. I can't do it for too long, but my friends when I went couldn't do it even for a tenth of the time that I could. So maybe it's in my blood.
During the pandemic, I trained myself to go up to half an hour of squatting,
Mm.
Mm.
and it was pretty painful. Like I went up in 5 minute increments. So at some point, I felt like I mastered 20 minutes, so I could do 25. And afterwards, I felt there was no blood in my legs anymore.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't feel my legs after a while. But yeah, especially when I started, it was very difficult. But I heard it had beneficial,
Mm.
um, especially if you had your both of your feet straight on the ground. It's good for your back. And at the time, I had problems, so that's why I was working on that.
Yeah, it's something common in Asia in general, isn't it? That squat, very natural squat.
I didn't
That's
see it
what,
much in Singapore, I must say.
yeah. I have to say it's just completely otherworldly to me. So extremely good for your spine, though. This strawberry kickstarts a bit of a premonition or a prediction, rather, of future events. So something so banal comes to a really significant moment. I don't know why, but this memory of this part of the book sticks in my mind. It's just so understated by Sri Yukteswar, what comes up here, but it made such an impression on me when I read it. Sri Yukteswar was curious. Yogananda says about the strange little red fruits, and he bought a large basket, and Kanai and Yogananda were nearby, so he had offered them to taste the fruits. And as anyone knows, they can be quite bitter, strawberries. But me growing up with these, eating them weekly, probably, you get used to it. But it sounds like this is the first time that the group had maybe experimented with it. It wouldn't have been too common, I imagine, out in Calcutta way. So Yogananda says that he tasted one berry, but spat it out hastily on the ground, which I think is quite a comical sort of scene. And he comments to say it's a very sour fruit, and that he could never like strawberries. And it's a comment that I thought it's more of a youthful sort of statement, that, but it's trigger this prediction that Sri Yukteswar is about to say, Priyank.
Yeah. So we're going to cover a prediction a bit later in this section, but also YSS devotees. One of the devotees, Nitesh, told me that there's a really stunning YSS retreat center right there right now. I'll put a link to it. It's called Anand Shikhar, and they very sweetly reminisce that the reason for having this retreat center is Shimla is so beautiful, so very conducive to a quiet meditation, silent retreat. But also, they say that where Guruji spat out the strawberries, that's where the retreat center ended up being
Oh, wow.
built.
Oh,
Nice. So the landmark is there all these years after.
Mhm.
So this kind of comical scene Sri Yukteswar was laughing at, and he follows up, as I say, I see this in my mind's eye so casually. He says, "Oh, you will like them in America." At a dinner, very specifically, he doesn't just leave it there, but he gives the specifics to say, at a dinner, your hostess will serve them with sugar and cream. and after specifically she has mashed them with berries and a fork, you will see that you'll taste them and say, what delicious strawberries. Then you'll remember this day in Shimla. So he lays it out with multiple degrees of detail there, Mike.
And when I visited Boston, I noticed this is a big deal. I think it kind of makes sense when you think about it. When I lived in London, I remember I was thinking, what was Guruji doing when he was in London? And I think I remembered he spoke at this place called Caxton Hall, which is now turned into an apartment building. But my friend Mohit and we managed to get into the hall downstairs because there was a lady opening up the door for us. I think he was at Grosvenor House as well and giving a talk there. So you look for those kind of things, especially when he was there only for a few days. And then in Boston, you have that story now. Like Somerville is a part of Boston basically, and I know that Yoga Mata's house is now owned by a devotee, and I was fortunate enough to go. She hosted me and my friends, and we were served strawberries, and that was quite the ritual. So I can totally understand how when you are in Shimla and you feel like Guruji was here eating strawberries, that you make a ritual out of it as well.
I've only. That's very sweet, Mike. That's what a sweet gesture from that hostess. that you had.
Yeah.
I only had strawberries and cream once, and can you guess where it
At
was?
Wimbledon.
Yeah,
Wimbledon.
you knew it. You knew it.
Okay, that's the place to have it.
And they were phenomenal, like as good as the reputation.
They're really good.
Don't know what they must do, heaven knows, but they were fantastic, and they were free as well as a HSBC customer, so can't go wrong there.
Okay. No such thing as a free strawberries and cream. Correct. Somebody's paying for it somewhere. Yeah, they're amazing. They're exceptional. And Yogananda forgets this little moment that Sri Yukteswar lays out so clearly for him until later on, where he had arrived in America, in the US, and he was a dinner guest at home of Mrs. Alice Hassey. And this is Sister Yogamata. This is in West Somerville in Massachusetts. So he goes into detail, Yogananda, to say that there was a dessert of strawberries that was put on his table, and the hostess did pick up a fork and did mash the berries and did add cream and sugar. So sure, that would have been a really strong moment of deja vu, and he was told that the fruit was rather tart, and I think you'll like it fixed this way. Sister Yogamata remarked, and he took a mouthful and he did say that, oh, what delicious strawberries. And so as soon as he said that, his guru's prediction in Shimla emerged from the fathomless caves of memory. And he was awestruck to realize that his guru had long ago had a God-tuned mind that detected the program of karmic events, is how he puts it. It's such a nice way of putting it, actually. Wandering in the ether of futurity. What a poetic way to say, he could essentially see the future as if it was present time. Would have been mind blowing, right? And Sister Yogamata, we may have touched on her before, but just to talk about a little bit who she is, Mrs. Hassey here would have been one of the first students of the lesson students, one of the really prominent figures in the SRF YSS in the United States. So she was one of the members of a church where Yogananda had addressed the congregation in West Somerville. And Yogananda said that when he first saw her, when he first met the future Sister Yogamata, he said that God told him she is the one who will start this center in the United States. So she also had a significant influence on Dr. Lewis and had suggested to Dr. Lewis, based on his interest in spirituality, that strongly suggested to him that you should meet Swami Yogananda. And we know Dr. Lewis went on to have such a significant part in SRF as well. So I'd say a real cornerstone individual, and evidently had a part to play in this story that we just read about the strawberries and the prediction of the strawberries as well. So she's playing a fortuitous role for us all. And in the next leg of this journey, then they're in Shimla. The party had left Shimla and trained for Rawalpindi.
Quickly,
Yep.
sorry. My YSS devotees also told me where they stayed on that trip, which is basically a Kali Bari temple, and that sometimes temples have like staying facilities for devotees, yatris, we call them yatri nivas, like accommodation for pilgrims, essentially. Like, it's really basic. Once I stayed in one that so it's very rare to have one which has like one room just for yourself. You're usually staying with like 50 people, all men, and then women, say 50 people, women and children. And once I stayed in one in a Christian one, actually. They had, this one was unique, that every devotee had their own room, but they did not have their own bathroom. So you'd have you'd stay in the room, and there'd be a door in the back to the bathroom, which you go and you'd lock. And then the neighboring room also has a door to the same bathroom, so you've got to make sure you lock their side so they don't come in whilst you're in. And you got to remember to unlock it and then go back and lock yours, otherwise they can come out into your room for all these fun, quirky things that even back in those days, I'm sure Guruji would have had to have done, and Sri Yukteswar would have had to have done in these temples that they stayed in. So, and they're really, really cheap as well. So I'll put a link to it. It's a really nice, quaint little temple. But along the whole journey, I'm sure they would have stayed in various ashrams and temple accommodations and things like that. I doubt it would have been, 5-star luxury hotel, judging by this this accommodation.
This bathroom setup reminded me of, I think this is just how it was in the old days, because I remember the retreats at, I think at Encinitas, they were like that. They had the bathrooms like that. And recently I visited a really old observatory that was built in the early 1900s. And they had like a building there called the monastery, where all the astronomers would be, and they're like famous rooms there because famous people like Hubble stayed there and stuff. And they also had the same bathroom set up there, and it all looked like it was built in the 1910s, and they never changed it.
Yeah, and today you can of course travel around these parts, highly renowned, and Yogananda does go into detail in this chapter about the beauty of Kashmir and the surrounding areas. So yeah, I'm going in August to nearby the area, and hopefully, if I can get time, I'll visit a few places like this, where following in the footsteps of Yogananda and see what he saw, and the beauty. And this next leg of the journey, it did make me think, wow, the sheer distance that they cover. Maybe it's something Yogananda doesn't talk about, but it's incredibly impressive, just the commitment that they all had. They left Shimla and trained for Rawalpindi, and there they had a closed-top landau, and this is sort of an enclosed carriage, and it was drawn by 2 horses, and they were there for 7 days to Srinagar, the capital of Kashmir, Prag. Have you ever seen that?
No,
landau?
haven't been down that way, but my wife really wants to go there, so we're gonna do a big road trip one day, 6-weeker, around those parts in Punjab as well. But some listeners and readers will their ears may prick up at Rawalpindi, because I think it's probably now in modern day Pakistan, and the there's a famous cricketer who bowled over 100 miles per hour, so he was really, really fast. So even now, I think he's the fastest ever bowler, and they called him the Rawalpindi Express.
Yeah. And this trip, so they were going from Calcutta to Kashmir. I actually jumped on Google Maps, so I was looking at just the distance, and it's takes a total of about 2,537 kilometers, or 1,576 miles from Calcutta. So this is why a 7-day trip was necessary, even between the points, which were much closer to Kashmir, from Shimla onwards. 7-day trip drawn by 2 horses, and yeah, quite the commitment really to make this summer vacation, Mike.
They would have probably, in the flatlands, they would have probably taken a train, right? And then switched to horse carriage when the hills started, I would assume. Especially with Mukunda's free access to train tickets.
Yeah. Yeah, but 7 days in a horse-drawn carriage, I think you would be
Yeah,
quite
not ideal.
quite happy to be arriving, I would say, by the end of it. And the second day, they were traveling northbound. It brought into view the true vastness of the Himalayan mountains, Yogananda says. And as the iron wheels of the carriage creaked along hot, stony roads, they were enraptured with the changing vistas of the mountain's grandeur. I kind of pictured these iron rails clattering along all the different sort of rocks, and I'm sure it would have been quite the experience traveling along. Could you imagine doing that with, Sri Yukteswar and Yogananda? The 4 boys that were going with them were very lucky. Frank, you're on mute.
Very, very, very lucky. We lifetimes of work to get that kind of blessing, I imagine. So not luck, actually, hard work. There's no such thing as luck, apparently. Yeah. But I can, you mentioned long journey by horse carriage. I think he mentions later how uncomfortable it was, actually, in a banterous way. But this description here, the changing vistas of the mountainous grandeur, and the journey brought into view the true Himalayan vastness. I can't emphasize how true these and how good the description these words are, because from a distance you think they're just clouds because they're merging in with the clouds. So snow, you can't see the body of the mountain because that merges with the blue somehow. You can only see the tops, which are white, and then the cloud. If there's some clouds, you think, oh, this is part of the clouds, and you get closer and you realize this is actually, that they're merging with. That's so high that they're merging with the clouds. So it's a phenomenal experience, and just to kind of realize that how inconsequential you are in the vast scheme of things. It makes you realize that, which is quite grounding.
Shiva's teeth, as they say, laughing at death, as the Himalayan mountains are described. And so one of the 4 boys that were accompanying Sri Yukteswar and Yogananda says, "Sir," and his name is Auddy, said to Master, to Sri Yukteswar, "I'm greatly enjoying these glorious scenes in your holy company." And this sent a throb of pleasure to Yogananda's heart. And this was caught by Sri Yukteswar, this thought. Yogananda was acting as the host on the trip, so he took this compliment personally, and Sri Yukteswar whispered to Yogananda not to flatter himself. and said Auddy is not really as entranced with the scenery, but rather with more with the prospect of leaving us long enough to have a cigarette. And I just thought this was such a, like you mentioned, playful banter, Priyank, between the two. And again, just a very subtle, intuitive moment from Sri Yukteswar, really to pick up on what was happening there. It shocked Yogananda. And he said in a bit of an undertone, please don't break our harmony by speaking these unpleasant words. And it's such a sweet moment, isn't it? It is a harmonious experience that they're sharing, with the beauty of the Himalayan mountains, and everybody's getting on well. And then Sri Yukteswar does the unpleasant, has the unpleasantness by speaking the truth to Yogananda, let's say, to break this illusion that Yogananda is under.
Yeah, agreed. It's a big bit of a shake, isn't it? But because it's such an innocent image that Guruji has of his disciples, of the brother disciples, who kind of has them on the same, puts them on the same level as him. Like he really considers them as peers in all walks. So then he doesn't want to, bring them down to a lower real position. But I was just looking at how you pronounce this fellow's name in the Hindi book, and it's Auddy. Auddy. So basically, it's R, and then there's a double D, R to D.
Oh, okay.
I've never heard that name, but
there we have it. So Auddy, okay, yeah. So Auddy. Yogananda could hardly believe that Auddy was hankering for a smoke, and he looked rather apprehensively at his usually irrepressible guru. So he didn't want to believe it, because, as you said, Priyank, he probably innocently, let's say, sees the company to be pure and true, and speak just like he might speak, and think just like he might think. And wouldn't be sort of saying one thing and meaning another, probably. So Sri Yukteswar kind of shrugs it off and says, very well, I won't say anything to Auddy. And he chuckled. But you're soon going to see that when we stop, he's going to seize the opportunity. This was, again, going back to how Sri Yukteswar handled all the little diversions, let's say, that he was masterminding in the previous chapter, was passive. It was very, very passive, wasn't it? He didn't seem to headbutt or challenge head on. He knew that the truth would come out. Greg.
Just reading something else in these few lines. Where he says, I felt a throb of pleasure at Auddy's appreciation for I was acting as a host on this trip. And then Sri Yukteswar kind of like takes him down, doesn't he, in terms of his not maybe a bit of pride in being a good host, but because it's not like pride in the sense that he wants to show off or how great this trip is. He's just happy that to have been a facilitator for such a good trip. But this line where Sri Yukteswar says, "Don't flatter yourself," it kind of he's kind of bringing Mukunda his expectations of people and kind of down, isn't he? And his image of how good a trip he's kind of planned as well. It kind of intimates that it's okay to feel good about doing things for people, but at the same time, you don't want to do whatever you're doing just so you can feel good about it. If you catch my sort of drift. So in the Gita, there's don't focus on the fruits of your whatever you're doing, just focus on the action itself. So I think the message kind of inferred there is that you should focus on doing things for people, good things for people, regardless of whether or not you're going to feel good as a result. Don't know if you can get that in those few lines.
I did as well. I actually took it a step not a step further, but I looked at the idea of being responsible whenever somebody's not having a good time as well. And actually, it's like that savior complex where you kind of think that you should go and make everybody happy when that reality is also not necessarily true. They have to do it themselves.
Did a great
But
job in Brazil, though, Chris, I must say,
thumbs up,
during your wedding.
host for the most. Yeah, well, I think it's a very natural thing, isn't it, to take pleasure when Yogananda would have, after 3 years of trying to orchestrate this trip, he was happy that people were enjoying themselves. So yeah, it's a nice little check by Sri Yukteswar here. And there was a footnote next to the idea of Sri Yukteswar's proposed that Auddy is going to slip away for a cigarette, and it's a mark of disrespect in India to smoke in the presence of one's elders and superiors, which in Vienna they don't really observe. Everybody smokes here. So many people I actually looked up, it's 32%, aren't they? Tense.
It's got to be pretty high in quite a lot of Europe. France is pretty high as well, isn't it?
London's only 11%.
Yeah, I feel like it's a bit less in
Pretty
London.
good.
Italy must be like 95%.
Yes.
I don't know. I haven't traveled that much, but every time I'm there, I just feel like someone's smoking next to me. But this little footnote, interestingly, it's in the SRF version, but the footnote is not in the YSS version because it would feel strange for an Indian reader to be like, "Oh, in India, the country in which you're reading this book, it's not nice to."
Yeah.
So I think that's probably true for a lot of footnotes that where it describes in India XYZ, because we've seen a few of those, right? Translations of words and things like that. So we're gonna, I think, see that a few times where it's not in the Indian copy, because when you see the Autobiography of Yogi in India, it looks exactly the same, but it's got Yoga the Satsang Society of India on the bottom, not Self-Realization Fellowship.
It's cheaper. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I was going to say you could buy a bunch of them, but you might get tariffed over there, Mike. So once again, we're going to look at this unraveling of what's about to occur here, as with strawberries, with this cigarette story. And as the carriage arrived at the small caravanserai, as that's a beautiful word, that who would have had to Google that word, caravanserai? Yeah, me for sure. The little roadside inn hostel hotel. So they arrived at their accommodation, and as the horses were led to be watered, Auddy inquired, "Sir, do you mind if I ride a little while with the driver? I would like to get a little outside air." So it's a bit cheeky, Lauren, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm kind of surprised that he's lied to Sri Yukteswar. Imagine lying to Sri Yukteswar. You would just know that he knows, you know? But I do find it kind of semi-amusing that, it's as you were saying in the footnote, it's not customary to smoke in front of your elders. But then instead of just saying, "I want to go for a smoke," he's gonna lie about it. And it just reminds me that, our guru knows everything about us, and no matter what, we can't hide, as in this case too, right?
Yeah, and the fact that he has to cover it up in this,
Yeah.
in this way as well. It's also a prod, if you needed one, from Guruji. Don't smoke. And he never says this explicitly, does he? Don't smoke, don't drink, don't eat meat. He always sometimes he suggests it and then says the benefits and the disbenefits of doing things and not doing things. So you have to kind of read in between the lines, because there's 6 or 7 paragraphs here of almost a full page about the deceit of Auddy and the essentially Mukunda's expectation of him not expecting his brother disciples to be smoking. So you can just gloss over this and just carry on smoking, or you can read into this that
Mhm.
Guruji does not want us to smoke.
Mm. Yeah, indeed. I also like here this next line. Sorry, Lauren, do you want to jump in?
No, it just reminded me of I think it was in the Awake documentary when Guruji was talking to one of the disciples and he was saying, well, can I go down there and drink with all my friends and smoke and then come
Mm.
back up here? And Guruji was like, yes, you
Yeah.
can continue, but if you carry on the spiritual path, you may find that those desires go. So, maybe also that's why Priyanki doesn't explicitly, do not, because it will just naturally happen.
Yeah, I think he was sort of saying it the other way, wasn't he? He was like, you can do these things, but then you might lose your desire to do the practice. I think,
Is that
wasn't
what he
it?
was saying? No, I think he said,
No, I agree with Owen. Yeah, he said.
Oh,
I
was
yeah,
think
it?
the words were. Um, he's like, you're saying I can smoke. He's like, yeah, you can smoke, you can drink. And it was Herb, wasn't it? Herb something.
yeah.
Chris,
Mm.
one of your favorite guys. You read his little book as well, I think, his little bio or something, isn't he? And then Guruji
No,
says,
really.
yeah, you can do this, you can do this. And then Herb was like, so he's telling I can see all these people, I can meet all these great people, and you're still fine with that. He's like, yeah, yeah. And then Guruji said, but I can't promise you that your desire to do these things won't still be there if you carry on doing your practices.
Oh,
Not
okay.
that
I remember that
not
differently.
that you won't do your practices because you're smoking. It was that your desire will naturally
Good eye.
disintegrate.
Was that okay? Okay, that's good. Thanks for clearing up that, because I remembered it the other way around. You might stray from the path or something. That's good. That's even better. That's
Either
nice.
way, it's the same outcome, I suppose. You stop smoking,
Yeah.
stop drinking.
Stop it. Yeah. And Sri Yukteswar doesn't really. He knows what's going to happen, right? And he doesn't jump in to be like, "Oh, stop! You shouldn't do this." And he gave permission, but then remarked to Yogananda that he wants fresh smoke, not fresh air. Which is what I'm funny, I've used this line more, to some effect, whenever people do say, I need to go get fresh air, and they stand out there and smoke. So it's funny reading this line. I've used it multiple times to people myself, Lauren.
I wonder also how Sri Yukteswar felt in this moment, giving him permission to smoke. Because do you remember in the chapter about the blue sapphire, when he was really trying hard to dissuade I can't remember his name now, but his disciple to stop smoking, and then he had to come back later because the damage had already been done, and that Sri Yukteswar was quite pained by it, and he had to not even he didn't even want to speak with him at first. So yeah, I wonder how Sri Yukteswar might have felt in this moment to sort of give permission for him to go and do something that he knew was wrong for him. But I
Yeah,
guess that's also unconditional love, isn't it? In a way.
and maybe the context
Yeah.
of maybe it is just one cigarette or something, it is rather benign, maybe. Could be a prank.
Yeah, my father-in-law often gives parenting lessons to my sister who's got a child, and he always says remember, I never told you that you don't go and smoke, you don't drink, you don't do this thing. You just did it naturally because I set the culture in our family. So he was almost suggesting that if I tell you, I shouldn't need to tell you, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, because it's already ingrained in our kind of values. So I get this kind of feeling from Sri Yukteswar as well. I think I already knows that he shouldn't smoke, and he doesn't really need Sri Yukteswar to tell him don't smoke. He's probably, even if he says it explicitly, he's probably going to do it, and probably incur, if Sri Yukteswar does tell him don't smoke, he probably incurs a greater negative impact if he then does smoke than if Sri Yukteswar hadn't said it at all, because we all know what Sri Yukteswar's high expectations would be in this regard, right? He knows it, certainly.
Yeah. He's having fun with it anyway. He's got a bit of a twinkle in his eye, Sri Yukteswar. And he's instructing Yogananda, hey, crane your neck up through the carriage door and see what Auddy is doing with the air. And this is as the landau had resumed its noisy progress over the road. So they were continuing on their journey, and Sri Yukteswar obeys. Oh, sorry, Yogananda obeys, and he was startled. Would you be startled? Do you think? In the innocence of young Mukunda, young Paramahansa Yogananda here, the innocence of him in this moment to be startled. I just thought was so sweet that he did observe Auddy in the act of exhaling rings of cigarette smoke. He wasn't casually sort of doing it. He was quite boldly out there exhaling rings of cigarette smoke. And he had an apologetic glance to Sri Yukteswar, his guru, once he realized that he was indeed telling the truth, Parag.
Yeah, I've been actually in this position where I've been startled just like this to discover like the bad habits of some people that I've put in like really high regard in my own mind, and then you kind of come across them smoking or drinking or whatever it was at that time, and I was exactly as Mukunda was. I was completely taken aback, and I suppose I don't know if it's naivete on my part or just wishful thinking of seeing people in a much higher regard than you should, and placing them on a pedestal, etc. But for me anyway, it's very startling when it happened.
I just thought with how many stories have we had now? I think this is maybe the theme that's coming out of this chapter already, is just trusting your guru. Is just on like having the faith and having complete trust in the guru. And as young Mukunda here says, after in an apologetic light, I'll pause, come to Mike first.
No, you go. I'll come after.
You'll come after.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Sri Yukteswar is there receiving this apologetic glance by Mukunda. And Mukunda says, you are right as always, sir. Auddy is enjoying a puff along with the panorama. Somewhat comically, I think there. And he surmised that the friend had received a gift from the cab driver because he realized, that there were no cigarettes that accompanied Auddy from Calcutta. So he would have seen that the cab driver maybe had one or two on him and orchestrated this little moment himself. So he put two and two together and sort of came to this realization, which, is just so casual. There's a couple drop-ins from Sri Yukteswar here on future events that he knew for sure were happening. And I thought, well, how do you guys actually think this was done? Because we take it for somewhat granted, in a sense, with the powers of the gurus, the avatars in Sri Yukteswar and that they have this ability. I thought this is just the power of intuition, in a sense that this moment with the cigarettes anyway, this intuitive moment that he spots with Yogananda and how he was perceiving this compliment, and then intuitively he knew what was really going to happen. And I thought maybe we could read a few excerpts from writings of Paramahansa Yogananda on intuition to try to pull in some knowledge, to develop this power ourselves. Maybe we can catch some of these moments happening in our lives. Lauren, do you want to kick us off just with that first reading?
Intuition is soul guidance, appearing naturally in man during those instants when his mind is calm. The goal of yoga science is to calm the mind, that without any distortion, it may hear the infallible counsel of the inner voice.
The cultivation of intuitive calmness requires unfoldment of the inner life. When developed sufficiently, intuition brings immediate comprehension of truth. You can have this marvelous realization. Meditation is the way.
God is the whisper in the temple of your conscience, and he's the light of intuition. You know when you are doing wrong, your whole being tells you, and that feeling is God's voice. If you don't listen to him, he becomes quiet. But when you wake up from your delusion and want to do right, he will guide you.
There you go. Some nuggets to take away from this part of the chapter. Nuggets of wisdom there from Yogananda. And that'll do us really for this part of the chapter. So we have more to look forward to in the next part. So Mike will take us through. But anything that we missed, gang, on this part of the chapter? Happy we covered it all. All right. Well, Mike, do you want to take us away with what we have to look forward to? I know Lauren's going to chime in as well with. You guys are going to do a joint episode next time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're merging our episodes because we are it's a lot about the journey and they're going to those amazing places. The first place they will be in is Srinagar. And I encourage everyone, like these days it's so much easier, right? You just Google those places, you just see pictures of them and you go, oh my God. I don't know how you pronounce the name of that river exactly. I think Jhelum River. But Guruji talks about how it has many bridges. And I looked at some of the pictures with the mountains in the background and incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Then they go to a Shankaracharya temple in Srinagar. And there Yogananda falls into a trance and has a vision of Mount Washington. Not the first one, not the last one, which I always find amazing how he sees exactly the buildings that he will later establish in the US. And then they go to, they mention a few more places, and it's almost reads like a tourism ad for Kashmir, the way he describes all those places. There's this place called Gulmarg. I don't know if I pronounced that directly, but every single picture I've seen from Gulmarg reminded me of the Alps, reminded me of where I grew up. Looks amazing. You can ski there. There's beautiful little towns in the mountains. And then the other two places he mentions are Shalimar. I think that's a famous one. At least I went to one or two Indian restaurants of that name. So I think that's fair enough. And then Nishad Bagh looks incredible as well. It's a palace built on top of a stream, and then this stream waters all the gardens of the palace. So incredible. And then I can give it to Lauren to continue.
And then we get treated even more because Guruji writes about the two most beautiful places on earth. And then he also goes on to describe many other beautiful places that he has visited. So not only do we get a nice little guide to where we can visit, but also to where Guruji has gone. So yeah, looking forward to exploring those next week.
Awesome. Well, with closing today, we'll say a prayer on intuition in honor of the great Sri Yukteswar, who's guiding us. So I'll take lead. Heavenly Father, thy cosmic life and I are one. Thou art the ocean, I am the wave, we are one. I demand my divine birthright, intuitively realizing that all wisdom and power already exist in my soul. God is just behind my reason today and every day, and is guiding me to do the right thing always. Om Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.